This is the most perfect bake-at-home brownie. See if you agree. This is the focus group.
They're all business, except when they're not. It's the Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash.
Welcome to the Focus Group. Tim Bennett here, as always, with my good friend and co-host, Mr. John T. Nash. We are the Focus Group here every Wednesday through any social media outlet or anywhere you seem to find your podcast or your shows like this. This is a video cast, John.
Yeah, well, it's the video cast of the audio podcast.
Of the audio podcast. In our 16th year, and we release it again on Saturday, where we get the biggest hit because people are still used to listening to us on Saturdays. And I did a long opening today, John. I guess a little more longer. You had found a great article about making store-bought brownies at home and what is the best mix, and it's a great story.
I was surprised by the results, personally.
Yes, so we'll share that later on in the show. And before we get going, Mr. Nash, the Super Bowl is this weekend. And did you see the story about how much Super Bowl tickets are going to cost?
No, I was paying more attention to how much spot time was actually sold. What's a ticket worth?
Do you have a guess? Because I was way off.
Do I want to say 2,200?
So I think you're better than I was. So this is Super Bowl 58, and the average ticket is about $8,000.
Eight?
Yeah.
$8,000?
The cheapest that they found at TickPick was $8,000. It's the most expensive Super Bowl on record, according to SeatGeek and TickPick. Average prices are ranging from $10,527 to $12,082 on secondary markets. For reference, last year's Super Bowl, the average ticket was about $5,700 to $6,000. They said they think part of it has to do with the location. Last year, the Super Bowl was in Arizona. This year, it's in Las Vegas. But they did a whole list of what they found they felt were the cheapest seats with fees. So they were $8,900, $8,000, $9,300, $8,200, $8,400, $8,100. It's shocking to me because I can't imagine. Then they go back about 5 years, back to Super Bowl 53, which was in Atlanta. The ticket was $53.29. Who the hell can afford to go to the Super Bowl?
That last number of the 53.29 was from 5 years ago?
Yeah, it was Super Bowl 53. So that would have been 5 years ago.
I guess the next question is how are the tickets selling?
No, like hotcakes.
It's
got to be all corporate, corporate tickets. When I went to the Super Bowl once, and I thought it was outrageous. It was $325 was the ticket. Now, this was in the early 90s. It was in Minnesota.
It's showing your age.
And I took Marianne. I had just moved to Minnesota. She had flown up, and she and I went to the Super Bowl. And somebody had offered us $400, I think, for the tickets out front. And, 3 minutes after we were into the spectacle, we said we should have sold the tickets. But we wanted to go see what a Super Bowl was like, with the Gloria Estefan sang. And it was, I can't imagine that 90% of the U.S. population could afford, although seems to be happening everywhere with, even if you wanted to take kids to go see an NBA game or something
Disney
in a
on
city.
Ice.
Disney, right. It could be $1,000 easy for 4 people to go to something like that, or to go to a basketball game, or I think baseball is still probably the better bargain of the group.
I agree.
But it's outrageous to me how much the tickets were. I thought, who could ever, if you were a real fan of, in this case, the Chiefs or the 49ers, and you were going to go with a couple of people, are you going to spend, $17,000 on tickets, and then what's your hotel going to be and your airfare? And it'd be a $20,000 weekend.
I remember years and years ago, and my nieces were really young, we took them to see The Lion King on Broadway.
Yeah.
I was appalled then that each ticket was $110. And this goes back 20 some years, right? And the whole thing about the Super Bowl being in Vegas, like when they had F1 out there, the car race, the tickets originally were starting at $2,200 or $2,500, and they were not selling. They dropped them down to $800. I don't even think they sold all the tickets for that. I know Super Bowl's different, but
Well, the Book of Mormon, how much are those tickets? Weren't they at 700 or something?
150, $200.
Oh, I thought they were
easy.
700. People were
Some
saying.
yes, you can if you buy for advanced seating, orchestra, etc.
Orchestra
It could be
center.
that expensive. Yeah.
See, I think that's, I don't know. I just think that's outrageous for anything. What's it cost to get into a museum in New York if you went to the Met? Is it $30 an adult?
as a
20?
New York resident, we're allowed to pay what we want. I've seen people pay a dime.
What do you mean as a New York resident?
The museum has some amazing endowments and funding, and they get money from the cultural affairs thing. So you can actually show your license or your proof of residency and pay $1 or pay 10 cents or whatever. But normally the suggested entry is $18 to $20, maybe.
Is that for anybody? So if I just went.
If you just.
And what about the fact that I pay taxes in New York?
Well, that's why we get to pay what we want for the museum.
But I can't say. Could I say I pay taxes here? I don't have a New York license, but I'm paying you tax. Will they let me in?
I don't know if they would. I don't know if that would fly. No. I went with a friend years ago, and we went. He said, "Here, watch this." We went up to the counter, and he said, "I want to pay $1 a piece." And they're like, "Are you residents?" Yeah. Okay. Welcome. Enjoy the museum. I never forgot that because Bob and I are always like, pay what we want to, And then Bob got wise to it, and now he'll say, "Let's just pay what we want to pay."
Really?
Yeah.
Are all the museums like that, or just?
I think the Metropolitan Museum of Art is like that. I don't think the Guggenheim is. I'm pretty sure MoMA is not like that. There are a couple,
Right.
but that's one of them. Maybe the Natural History Museum. I have to think about that.
What about the Bronx Zoo? I wonder what that costs. That's public,
I have
right?
never been, and I'm dying to go. And
You've
look how
never
long
been
I've
to the
lived
Bronx
here.
Zoo?
No.
Oh my gosh!
Maybe as a kid. I just don't remember.
That was a big trip when I grew up in Stamford. It was take the bus into the Bronx Zoo, and that was always a fun day. We would go down to the Bronx Zoo. I can't believe you haven't done that. That's shocking.
I know.
That's shocking to me.
There's Adam took me on a bike ride in the Bronx the day after Christmas or 2 days after Christmas, and we rode around this. And I was riding around a neighborhood that I literally live like 10 minutes from, right? And there were these enormous houses with stone wall. It looked like we were in Maplewood, New Jersey or something. And I'm like, we're in the Bronx, and you see the Hudson. And I said, Adam, I've lived here for 38 years. I've never been on this road in my life. He's laughing his ass off. He goes, no, that's everybody. Back to the Super Bowl for a second. This whole Taylor Swift thing and Kelsey, and is there a psyops going on? Are they going to throw the game? Like,
That's ridiculous.
MAGA got really spun up about that one, huh?
Yeah, well, I think some pundit had the best reply to that. They said, first you're telling us that President Biden is feeble and a fool and can't put her sentence together, yet he planned this big diabolical, thing around the Super Bowl. You
got to twist yourself into a Dutch pretzel to get that kind of result, right?
Yeah. And then when Mr. Trump got the $83 million lawsuit or
the judgment.
The judgment, I flipped over to Fox to see what they were talking about. Hunter, Hillary. It's nothing. Didn't even mention it. Weren't even mentioning the thing, and I thought, man, and Taylor Swift.
You'll appreciate our household. I don't know if you're the same, but lately, I just can't watch the news, and I read the news. I read the newspaper, so I know what's going on. I don't need to watch the opinion pieces, the whole thing. So every morning we used to watch Joe Scarborough or CBS This Morning or CNN,
Right.
whatever. Now Bob comes into the living room, and BBC America runs Star Trek: The Next Generation, usually weekdays, starting early. So he'll come in and he'll sit down, and there's a Star Trek episode playing. Not a peep out of him. Normally he would say, "Do you want to go to the news?" And I said, "Do you want me to go?" The other day I said, "Do you want me to switch back to?" No. The 23rd century's fine.
So you're just sitting there watching old sci-fi.
Reruns that I've seen before. Yeah,
It's like me watching Lucy on Pluto.
Isn't it a much better experience? Put you in a better mood, right?
Yeah. I was surprised. I was watching a Lucy, and it was the first time I ever remember, because you never really knew.
No,
They didn't delve into any of that stuff, but
you didn't know the weather. You
Right.
didn't know who was the president. You didn't know. Yeah.
But they did talk about President Eisenhower. They made some comment
okay.
about President Eisenhower, and which I thought was interesting, because they never did that. They never delved into that.
Who was in the White House? Yeah.
Seinfeld was like that too, really. Other than New York with Mayor Dinkins when they did the yogurt thing where they all gained weight
I
with the
remember the
non-fat
yogurt
yogurt.
episode.
Yeah. So, Mr. Nash, what caught your eye this week?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
All right, we are going to the land of the pharaohs for what caught my eye this week. And it's surprising to me because as a kid, I always wondered what they would look like if they did this. I'm surprised they're doing it at all. But the headline is Egypt is planning to reclad or renovate one of its ancient pyramids using granite. And it has a lot of heritage experts horrified. So, when you see the pyramids today, they have a stepped appearance because apparently they used to be either clad in granite or limestone with gold, like a gold cap or something, especially the Great Pyramid at Giza.
What's inside of those, John?
It's all solid rock except for like a burial chamber and a couple of tunnels, And if you talk to the ancient alien crowd, it's some kind of spaceship landing thing or a transmitter for power. I just think it's a tomb.
Yeah.
But this is one of the smaller pyramids on the Giza Plateau, and it's already begun. The Supreme Council of Antiquities posted a video on Facebook, and they made an announcement that they are going to be recladding this 5,000-year-old pyramid, and they're using granite and mortar. And the pyramid was designed around the time of Pharaoh Menkaure, Menkaure, Menkaure. The reason the heritage experts are upset about this is this has been exposed to the elements for a long time. Years and years ago, the granite was stripped off. And in fact, there's rumor that sometimes when they took the limestone or the granite off these pyramids, they used them for other buildings like churches or something like that. So they're wondering why they want to reclad it anyway. But the project manager is saying that this is going to be a gift to the world, that you'll be able to see what a pyramid actually looked like back in the day. I mean, we're talking thousands of years ago before this granite came off. So the picture, if you're watching on YouTube, what I'm showing is a bunch of workers at the base of this smaller pyramid. Mind you, this is one of the smaller ones. The Giza Plateau is a couple. This is the smallest one and one of the oldest. And they're starting the work of cutting and placing these granite stones over this. They'll probably put a capstone on it. Part of me is like, well, that's kind of cool. It's supposed to be done in 3 years. If you go to Egypt, you'll be able to see what one small pyramid might have looked like at the time. But then the other part of me thinks, okay, so you're going to put stone over stone. Aren't you inviting like all sorts of trouble if there's moisture seepage, or like it's the desert? Maybe I'm just being crazy, right?
Well, it's like painting a great piece of antique furniture and then realize I shouldn't have painted it.
Or it's like you watch the Antiques Roadshow and someone says, "Oh, this would have been worth $50,000, but you repainted it and it's now worth $10."
You stripped it and sanded it down; it's worth nothing. Yeah,
it's that kind of thing. So the pyramid's only 213 feet tall, and as I said, it's going to take about 3 years. And there's a Japanese company that's backing the effort, and they claim that as they clad the pyramid in stone, they are going to do extensive archaeological work and documentation, and so there's going to be a whole record of what they've done and what they found. I think part of me is like, why bother? And the other part is, well, why not, right? If it's a small pyramid, we know what the other ones look like. Maybe I'm just being,
No, I'm with you. I don't know. To me, it looks almost fake. It looks like that fake stone you'd put over something.
Oh, you mean in the picture? It looks like that.
Yeah.
Yes, it looks like they put down a sheet of plastic that was printed to look like stone, right?
Yeah. Oh. I thought that there was all kinds of rules about not touching that stuff. And
Well, there are, but this is the Egyptian government changing the rules so they could do this, and it's a gift to the world. You know what? If they finish it and everybody loves it,
Okay.
And tourism is one of their biggest industries, right? So if you want to draw people, I'm not,
Although
I'm
I don't know if a
50-50
lot of
on it.
people are flocking there yet, again, with all that's going on right next door, right?
Yeah, true.
So, sadly. My story is certainly vastly different, as it always happens. The headline was Martina Navratilova and Chris Evert accused of turning their backs on women by the Saudi Arabian ambassador. So your friend and mine, John, Martina Navratilova, tennis great, and Chrissy Evert have teamed up, and they had written an opinion piece last week because Saudi Arabia has decided that they are going to host the WTA finals in Saudi Arabia. So the Women's Tennis Association is considering moving the season-ending tournament to Riyadh. And Princess Rema bin Bandar Al Saud is disappointed that Martina and Chris Evert are against this. Combined, Martina and Chrissy won 18 Grand Slam single titles. Martina 67, Chrissy 69. And their opinion piece in the Washington Post said, "We did not help to build women's tennis to be exploited by Saudi Arabia." And Martina and Chrissy both pointed out about how women are not considered equal citizens in the country, and they fought for so many years to get women's tennis to be compatible or to be on the same level as men's tennis in sports, and that they see this as a regression for women's tennis, and it's just a money grab. And she actually had a name for it called sports washing, which people are talking about. Saudi Arabia just went through this with soccer,
kind of,
golf. Okay. They did it with golf.
Oh yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
the live thing,
Right, and so Martina is pressuring the Women's Tennis Association, along with Chrissy Evert, not to go to Saudi Arabia. Martina then also added, aside from the part that the country still makes women have male guardianship if you're going out, they just allowed women to drive finally. It's no longer a criminal offense. Women can finally drive. But she also made note that they criminalize LGBTQ people and to the point of possible death sentences. And she said they have a long-term record on human rights abuses and not a place to hold an international competition. So I give Martina credit. She walks the walk. She will say it, and she's not afraid to say it. And she says what she believes. And in this case, I don't disagree with her in many regards. I think we've given Saudi Arabia over the years a free pass due to the fact that the oil was involved, right?
Well, also their power, their geopolitical power in the area. Wasn't the World Cup held there recently? And it was all the teams who normally support LGBTQ. They have it will be like our NFL having an LGBTQ night or something. All the World Cup players were told they should, can anything that has to do with LGBTQ, no rainbow, this, whatever. And a lot of teams and a lot of individuals actually objected to that. It's like, okay, fine, you want to have it in Saudi Arabia, but right. So everybody played by the rules. I'm with you, and I'm actually with Martina, frankly.
Yeah.
On this one, it's like, yeah. If that's what the stated intent of the country, and it's a theocracy. If that's what that's great. But that doesn't mean I have to have my sporting event there, right? Or I don't have to have women's tennis events there.
Yeah, they said Saudi Arabia is doing this to help their image. They said they made heavy investments in golf, Formula One, and football and boxing, and apparently, I guess also that Martina and Chrissy were a little upset because Billie Jean King seems to be okay with it. With going there.
Well, but see, she can hold that opinion. She could think that it's good for everybody. It lifts, a rising tide lifts all boats. But we're still talking about Saudi Arabia, right?
Yeah, well, that's where Billie Jean was coming from. She said she thought it was important to have a seat at the table and at least show, if you can, and help break stereotypes. So Billie Jean's looking at it a different way. Martina's like, nah, we're not going to support you. Billie Jean is, well, maybe we can start conversations. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
Yeah,
good. It's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're the same way though. I'm not sure what conversation it's starting, but okay, it's a conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. So those were caught my eye this week. As many of you know, Deep Discount's a partner of ours here on the Focus Group for quite some time. You can find them by going to focusgroupradio.com. You can click on the Deep Discount logo, start shopping away. We appreciate your support of them because of their support of us. And right now there's the 50th anniversary sale going on. So John did the math, 1974.
Yeah.
John, already
movies
50
from
years.
1974.
Movies from 1974. So there's some great movies you can find to build your library during the 50th anniversary sale. Mr. Nash, what did you find this week?
By the way, there are a lot of amazing movies that were released in 1974. One of the ones at the top of my list is Chinatown, starring Jack Nicholson. Amazing Oscar-winning movie. Love the story. Worth it for anybody's collection. But we were talking on many previous episodes. We talk about how you can't see everything you want when you want because the streaming services don't have them. I picked the original movie version of Murder on the Orient Express. It stars Albert Finney, Lauren Bacall, Ingrid Bergman, Jacqueline Bisset, Sean Connery, John Gielgud. I mean, it's like Anthony Perkins. It was directed by Sidney Lumet. It's one of those movies that I remember seeing when I was younger, and I really enjoyed it. And the remake that came out recently was just not for me.
No.
You could pick it up for $15.49 on Blu-ray, and sure enough, I went on to see if I could watch it, and I thought, oh, it's on Netflix. And just as we were getting ready to watch it, we realized that it left the streamer. It left Netflix on January 31st. So it had been there for a little while and it was gone. So I'm like, Bob goes, oh, I really wanted to see it because he has good memories of the Orient Express, Murder on the Orient Express as well. Because Albert Finney plays Hercule Poirot, the titular Belgian detective. So that's my pick, and it's because of this whole you can't see everything all the time, right?
Yeah, I there were a couple there. There was a John Waters movie, Female Trouble, which I think might have been on back order, and then I was surprised. Blazing Saddles. There were quite a few.
1974.
There were there. Herbie the Love Bug, rides again. I remember that as a kid. But I stumbled on. I did my deep dive into the catalog and came across something called Homebodies, which was a horror comedy. It said. Have you ever heard of it?
No. And I'm wondering why you like. I vaguely know this. Like I vaguely remember the title Homebodies, but I just. So anyway,
it's only 96 minutes long. Came out in 1974. It's about $12, and I read the description, and so then immediately we went and watched the trailer, and just my mouth was open about it because it was just so badly campy. So I'll just read a short description. With new construction underway throughout their Cincinnati neighborhood, the fixed-income seniors who lived in a decaying apartment building were sure they were going to be evicted. So the retirees, of course, get evicted, but they're going to build a new building there. So they take matters into their own hands, and they start killing the construction workers and the other people within the demolition crew. And they said it's a long-sought horror farce. And they said it's genuinely unique and creepy. The film has a seedy, dark, feudal feel to it, with an underlying its sick, twisted plot. The deaths are executed with very little remorse or feeling. They said the elderly who at first you seem to have pity on, turn into cold killing machines. So these little old ladies with little knit caps, and the old men or whatever, and so they go through these. They start, the construction woman comes, and she's gonna, she's the four person on the job, and they kill her. They kill the construction workers. They don't want their building taken down. So I just thought this would be one of these things where I thought it'd be interesting to see. I don't know. I've never seen it, but I thought it was something there that you're not going to find elsewhere. Homebodies on DVD.
I'd put this as a TBF, a Tim Bennett find.
Yeah, I don't know.
They come up, and they're good.
Our friend Lauren may be able to tell us. She's watched everything. I think she's watched everything.
She probably knows this movie, and she'd probably be like, oh, God.
So she'll let us know or say, oh, stay away.
Yeah.
What's the new release this week?
We do have a new release this week. It's Thanksgiving on Blu-ray. It came out on January 30th, so it's available right now. After a Black Friday riot ends in tragedy, a mysterious Thanksgiving-inspired killer terrorizes Plymouth, Mass., the birthplace of the holiday. Picking off residents one by one, what begins as a random revenge killings are soon revealed to be part of a larger, sinister holiday plan. Will the town uncover the killer and survive the holidays, or become guests at his twisted holiday dinner table? So this is Thanksgiving on Blu-ray. It seems to be a horror film, right?
Yeah.
All right, so folks, it's a deep discount. You can get there by visiting focusgroupradio.com and clicking on the deep discount logo. We invite you to do that and start your shopping extravaganza. Plenty of things to get there. And if you're interested in the 50th anniversary sale, that's referring to movies that came out in 1974. We've gone through a whole bunch. I picked a favorite of mine from childhood, and I love the cast, and I can't wait to see it again. Murder on the Orient Express Blu-ray. It's $15.49. TBF, a Tim Bennett find, Homebodies, which I heard of, maybe, but it's about a bunch of old folks who kill everybody because, well,
you'll have to watch the trailer and see. It left me uneasy. Just the trailer. I was like, ooh.
To leave you uneasy is something, right?
I thought this is just this is just creepy.
It's not what you thought. And the new release is Thanksgiving. Looks like it's a horror film that takes place in Plymouth, Mass. So we want to thank Deep Discount for being a partner of ours here on the Focus Group. As again, focusgroupradio.com, click on their logo and start the shopping away. We are going to take a really quick break, and when we return, we have a business birthday and a shop talk, so we'll see you on the other side.
You're listening to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com. Now back to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Available pretty much everywhere.
Hey, welcome back to the Focus Group. Tim Bennett here with John Nash. We are the Focus Group in our 16th year. Here coming to your screens or your tablets or your phones. How do a lot of people watch us? Is it phone now? I don't know.
That's a great question. I know folks who call it up on their TV on YouTube. So I don't know how we look in 4K, but we don't record that. So.
Yeah, YouTube sometimes will give us the stats of where people are coming from. I saw more and more mobile, which is interesting. So we'll have to check that out. So without further ado, we have one of our signature bits here on the Focus Group, our business birthday.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings, but the Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
So, John, here we are in February already. February 7th.
Don't even say, yeah.
I know. Born February 7th in 1804. This real person, John Deere. D-E-E-R-E, John Deere.
Mm-hmm.
American blacksmith and manufacturer. He founded Deere Company, which is one of the largest and leading agricultural and construction equipment manufacturers in the world. He was born in Rutland, Vermont, and he got his education for a little while. He had a brief education at Middlebury College, a good college up there.
Vermont?
Yep, in Middlebury, Vermont.
Right, yeah.
He did not, college wasn't necessarily for him, so he decided he went and joined an apprenticeship at a blacksmith shop. And went into the trade by himself as a blacksmith in 1826, and ended up getting married, had 9 children. 9 children, and decided that he in 1836 he left Vermont, but he said he fell on hard times, and he followed a business associate out to Illinois, and he settled in Illinois, and at the time. He had no difficulty finding work because there were a lack of blacksmiths in that area. So he started working as a blacksmith and found that cast iron plows out there were not working very well in the tough prairie soil. And he remembered back in his times in Vermont about the way he was constructing some of these steel plows, about polish and running them through sand and so forth, how they would sharpen. And so his conclusion was he was going to make this very highly polished steel plow and have a self-scouring shape or self-scouring steel plow to better handle the soil out in the Midwest and out in the West. And lo and behold, it was able to get through the sticky soil, or he said, which had lots of clay in it. And so he was essentially the Henry Ford of plows. He came up with this plow that really helped change farming. It was the plow that broke the plains, they said. Kind of like, what was the barbed wire? Barbed wire. Tame the West. Devil's rope. Yeah. Tame the West. This was the plow that broke the plains.
So it was able to deal with the soil, the more clay-like or tougher soil than just a plain old cast iron, which is iron is softer, yeah.
Right. So he developed and manufactured the first commercially successful cast steel plow. So it had polished steel, and it was able to get through the tough Midwest soil and worked better than any of the other plows. So he started selling them. He was, initially in the 1840s, he would do about 75 to 100 a year. But as he got popular and so forth, he moved the business to Moline, Illinois, and because it was a transportation hub and with the rail service. By 1855, he was making about 10,000 plows and selling them. And
wow.
So he did quite good. He insisted on making only high-quality equipment, he said. He was quoted as saying, "I will never put my name on a product that does not have it, or does not have in it the best that it is to me to find." So in other words, he never would try to cheapen any product. It's one of the great American companies. He retired and handed the business over to his son Charles, and then he got himself involved in politics. He was the mayor for 2 years in Moline, and was involved in the National Bank in Moline there, and did some other work. But credited, of course, with starting one of America's great companies. It's 188 years old. In 2022, they had $52.3 billion in revenue. The 60,000 employees worldwide. Half of them are in the United States and Canada. It's the largest agricultural machinery company in the world. The logo of the leaping deer, which is famous in the yellow and white paint, had been there since for 155 years. And they said one thing about him: he never repossessed any equipment from the farmers during the Great Depression. So they would, buy products on time.
Leasing or renting.
Right. During the Great Depression, a lot of companies, they mentioned International Harvester, whatever, were taking back farmers' equipment. He never, ever would do that. He, he stayed with the farmers, and I think that's why they had so much support. There's a funny sidebar here that they said the John Deere Farm Equipment Company recently has been criticized for being impossible to service or repair by owners or third parties, because you have to go to a John Deere dealer, which can access the computer code, similar to a car dealership, right?
Yeah, the chips.
You buy a Volkswagen, you'd be better go to VW and they can hook it up. And they said, however, this has proved to be useful, that they're so difficult. So they said that remote locking by the manufacturer is also possible. So if your tractor was stolen or something, John Deere could lock your tractor. So the Russians invaded Ukraine, as we all know.
I remember this, yeah.
And there are lots of John Deere tractors. So it's reported that when the Russians invaded Ukraine, the Russian troops stole a lot of these Ukrainian John Deere farm equipment. And the dealers and the owners were able to remotely lock the equipment, rendering all the tractors useless. So the Russians dragged all these things back to Russia, and they can't use them because they're all been locked by John Deere and or the farmers in Ukraine. So they're inoperable, which I thought was hilarious. So the fact that people were critical of it, it's now turned out to be, well, guess what?
Wasn't a bad feature, right?
It proved to be useful. So happy birthday, John Deere.
Excellent business birthday. And we just profiled John Deere. We talked about them 1 or 2 weeks ago, that they're going to be partnering with Ego, I think was an electric company, to provide some of their equipment with battery and electrification. Hey, upstate, there's a couple hats of choice that people wear, like ball caps. One of them is always a John Deere.
Deere.
When we went to County Fair this year for the very first time, John Deere was everywhere. So was Van. What was that? There's another one, a trucker. It's a trucker cap that's that everybody loves. I'll remember it in a second.
Did you get food at the county fair? Did I ask?
We did.
Did you get ice? What'd you get? Did you get any fried dough or anything?
Bob saw it in action, and he's like,
"You got to get it when it's right hot. If it gets cold, it's no good."
We saw people waiting online for it was fried ding dongs or Twinkies or something, and he's like, We did have a night. We had good lunch. I had a gyro, and then we had like ice cream from a dairy, which was amazing. And then we watched the little piglets race.
Did you go on any rides? Scrambler.
No, the rides. That's the other thing. We're watching these rides. We're like, one bolt, just one bolt,
and setting it up. They partied the night before.
Hey,
that
here.
stuff I think about at Quasapog or whatever, when we would go, that stuff, there was no padding. It was just hard metal. It was hot if you sat on it with your little, your little
you could
thighs.
Fried. You could,
right.
Because in the sun. Tim is talking about
it. Slam you into the sides, right? There was no padding.
And the side was like a piece of metal. You could literally cut or hurt yourself.
No one sued
Our
anybody.
parents tried to keep us away from Lake Quasapog by telling us an urban legend of how a child was decapitated on the Wild Mouse because the car jumped the track and went through a wire and took someone's head off.
I remember that. As a sidebar, do you remember you and I would go down there and take when I think about it now, because I don't think you had any training, we'd go down and take out the Zimbrowski sailboat.
The sunfish, yeah.
Did you know what you were doing?
No.
I'm thinking, I was thinking about that the other day. I said, John we'd go down there, and I had no idea what I was doing. You'd be like, oh, yeah, Carol said we could take it at any time. I don't know whether she did or not.
She did. She let us do it.
And we'd
yeah.
go there. I don't know how you knew what you were doing. We just go sailing around out there. No idea what we were doing.
Yeah, but Lake Quassapog wasn't big enough that if we had a problem, you could swim to shore.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
I was
sure.
looking at it on the map. I thought, where the hell, John? Because we would get there. It would be afternoon.
Yeah,
You would drag
midday,
it out.
like 3 in the afternoon, and we go out on this lake and yeah. Well,
I'm
hey, we
thinking-
survived, Tim. We're here.
Here I'm thinking you knew how to sail.
No,
And I said to myself, I'm not so sure John knew how to sail. Not that I even asked you.
but I
you
put
know.
up a good show, right?
Yeah, well, you seem to know what you were doing. You probably saw it once on a TV show. Remember?
TV show.
So, hey, our shop talk this week, John found, and this is probably one of my favorite shop talks in a while. We teased it at the opening of the show, but there's a woman who's a professional baker. Her name is Alana Al-Hatlani. And she decided, which I think was a great thing to do, and I was trying to think if there's a product we should try to do this with, John. But she had bought 5 brands of Box Brownie mix to see which one is the best, and she made them all and tried to keep it all within the same, followed the directions
She did
exactly.
everything. Yeah, she duplicated her process, right?
Right. So it was always in the middle rack.
Mm-hmm.
And, she tried to make sure that there were a bunch of constants in there. So one didn't have a leg
Well, she
up on
said
the
for
other.
consistency, she scaled all. She used the same measuring cups. She used the same 8x8 non-stick pan greased with baking spray and lined with parchment paper for each mix. All brownies were baked on the center rack. And she used a cake tester. I've never heard of a cake tester. I guess it's like some thermometer thing to check for doneness. And then she cooled each batch for exactly 20 minutes and then transferred it to a wire rack for another 20. She was very scientific, Tim, don't you think?
Right. And she used, so she bought Duncan Hines, Betty Crocker, Pillsbury, something Kodiak cakes, which I didn't know of, and Ghirardelli. And she said, as a professional baker, I think a good brownie has a strong chocolate flavor and a fudgy center and soft edges and aren't tough or dry. So she goes through each of them that she did, and then we'll tell you at the end which one she picked as the best one, which John had mentioned earlier. We were both somewhat surprised about. So who was the first one she
Yeah, so most of the
profiled?
mixes were similar in their requirements, like 2/3 a cup of oil or a 1/4 cup of water, usually 1 or 2 eggs. The box would say, mix with 50 strokes or something, and she didn't always count, but she knew she was doing far more than 50, and I have to agree with her having made some of these
Yes.
mixes. Her first one was Pillsbury. She baked for 50 minutes, which allowed them to rise significantly and dome in the center, which cracked a bit. When it completely cooled, they deflated a little, and the crack wasn't as obvious. They also had the classic shiny, crackled brownie top, and we all know what I'm talking about there. And she said, I didn't find any flaws with the Pillsbury brownies. These brownies were fluffy and thick with a fudgy center that wasn't overly dense and edges that weren't dry at all. They had a pleasant chocolate flavor and weren't overly sweet, so I couldn't fault them there. It's funny that she did this with Pillsbury because I usually go with like Duncan Hines or Betty Crocker. I haven't tried a Pillsbury brownie mix. But anyway, what was her next one?
So the second one was Duncan Hines, which was a chewy fudge brownie mix. And again, she followed all the directions, and she made sure that she was keeping true to the directions in the box. She said that Duncan Hines brownies had a classic crackle top, and but she said they needed a little more time to bake than the Pillsbury ones. She said that that the brownies were moist and had a nice chocolate flavor. She did say, however, that they were chewy but had a slightly dry edge. And but when baked through, she said the brownies were shiny with a crackled top. They were chewier than the others, and the edges were slightly dry, but they were solid, fudgy brownies overall. So her conclusion, seemed to be pretty good with the Duncan Hines.
Except for those edges and the
The
little
edges
bit
were
of
a little dry.
timing.
Yeah.
Her next mix-up was Betty Crocker dark chocolate brownie mix. This recipe called for 2 large eggs, a 1/2 cup of oil. See, there's a little variation there. Oven was preheated to 325, a little lower than normally for 315. She baked those for 53. The recipe says 53 minutes, the longest amount of time of any of the brownies that she tested. When baked, the brownies had a glossy chocolate exterior with a classic crackled top. And then she said, I found the taste of Betty Crocker's brownies be good, but not great. The edges weren't dry, and the center was fudgy, but the flavor fell flat. They tasted rather sweet, And the chocolate flavor wasn't as pronounced as I would prefer, or that she would prefer, which is interesting since they were labeled as dark chocolate. So Betty Crocker seems to have come in with a meh. What was her next
They were
one?
okay. Number 4 was Ghirardelli, which, of course, are famous for their chocolates. Aren't they from San Francisco?
Yeah, you're right about that.
So dark chocolate brownie mix, and so it only called for 1 egg, and she baked it at 325. She said the brownies looked darker than the other mixes, and but they did also have a shiny crackle top when they were baked. She cooked those for about 40 minutes. She said they weren't too sweet, and they had a denser, more fudge-like texture. She thought perhaps it was the addition of some chocolate chips that added the rich flavor to them. She said they had, of all the brownies, these had the most intense flavor of the bunch. Again, she thinks it's because there was some additional chocolate chips into the batter. She said the edges, however, were quite dry and a little tough. Her conclusion was they were okay from a fudgy standpoint, but she felt they were a little dry and a little tough.
Her last one was Kodiak Cakes chocolate fudge brownies. Now, I've made some of Kodiak's other things. So you'll see these in the baking section of a grocery store. Their big claim to fame is that they're healthier, in air quotes. They put in more protein into the mix. So you'll buy a Kodiak thing because you want your treat to have a little more protein, which is good for you. Called for 2 eggs. This time it's a half a cup of melted butter on top of oil and water that was put in. It was a 350-degree oven that she put them into. The batter was noticeably thicker than all the previous mixes, so much so that she had to use an offset spatula to evenly smooth it into the pan. See how when you dump into the pan, it just kind of sat there. She had to spread it around. It also had a dull, grainy texture, and like the Ghirardelli brownies, this mix had chocolate chips in it, though these were miniature. She made a point of bringing that out. So she says the Kodiak Cakes brownies were both dry and bland. I baked these for 22 minutes and noticed that they came out with little bumps on top instead of the characters to crackle. The mini chocolate chips I spotted while mixing also seemed to have disappeared. I'm sure they melted. Taste-wise, these brownies were the cakiest of the bunch, despite having fudge in their name. So fudge is that denser, but they're probably a little lighter and cakier. They were a little dry, even though I baked them for the shortest amount of time possible. She likes the ingredients of Kodiak Cakes brownies, but didn't enjoy the texture of the brownie. So
a lot of people like those. A lot of people like those sort of things because they think they have healthier ingredients. You know, there was whole grain wheat flour. You did that a while back with something. I was like, John, they're not good. Weren't you making some sort of brownie that you were pretending you really liked?
I made brownie. It was Skinny Girl brownies.
Yeah, or something.
And it was using sweet potato instead of sugar or something. And I brought them in, and you're like,
they're not as good as a brownie.
We only
you can have a
made 2
brownie, have a
batches.
brownie.
Yeah, I made 2 batches. We never went back to that.
Before we announced who the winner was, I went to Amazon to find out how much the boxes cost. So Betty Crocker brownie mix $2.59, Duncan Hines $1.38, so that was pretty cheap. Pillsbury $2.69, Ghirardelli $5.49, and the Kodiak brownies are $7.
Yeah, the Kodiak's expensive
for the box. So she ranked them all. Do you want to say what you want to go 5-1? So what was the number 5 of the rank?
Oh, the worst. Like I did.
The worst was Kodiak Cakes.
Basically,
She says she wasn't super impressed by Kodiak Cakes, especially since they were the most expensive option. She said, although they did have 8 grams of protein. So in the middle of the pack, you want to.
Then the picture she showed her, so she had it going left to right. The first is Kodiak Cakes. The second was, I guess, number 4 would be Duncan Hines.
Yeah, Duncan Hines and Betty Crocker she put in the middle of the pack.
And from the way she described it, Betty Crocker, the way she described the middle of the pack perfectly, right?
Yeah, she said.
And then she has the. Go ahead.
No, she said that they were. She said neither were bad, but Duncan Hines were a little chewy and Betty Crocker's were a bit too sweet. But overall, she said they were brownies that made people happy.
She ranked the winner as Pillsbury, and I now I'm dying to go out and buy a Pillsbury mix, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so number 2 was her Ghirardelli, and she said they had good flavor, but they were dry on the edges. And number 1, as John said, was Pillsbury. She said that it was the top pick because it yielded thick, fluffy brownies that were moist and had a nice flavor. They baked off evenly, weren't overly sweet, had a shiny crackle top, tender edges, and didn't dry out. So for $2.69, I thought we got to get a Pillsbury mix, but I'm like you. I'm not so sure I would have picked it up at the grocery store.
I have never made a Pillsbury, and I am now going to try a Pillsbury brownie mix. Why not, right?
Yeah, I was trying to think, is there something you and I should cook? We should try key lime
You
pies,
mean as
maybe,
in
or something?
like a pre-made?
Like one of these things. If we said, John, we're all gonna make chocolate chip cookies, or we're all gonna make sugar cookies, or we're all gonna make, I don't know, pick it up.
You know, I'm going to think about that.
Yeah, we'll have to
because
think
I've,
about it.
I've
Maybe the
seen
listeners
different-
can send us
Yeah,
something.
I've seen different mixes and a couple of different brands. Like brownies is the ones that have the most variety. Go into any store and try to buy gingerbread mix. There's only like one brand that does gingerbread.
You like
They do
gingerbread?
banana bread, gingerbread, pumpkin bread, but
You like gingerbread?
I love gingerbread. Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna have to get you something because there's a good one that I know. Our friend Kathy makes them. It's delicious.
Bob over the holidays made gingerbread biscotti,
Oh wow.
and he puts like Struzel's chocolate on it. It's delicious.
I saw 2 different cake brands, and I almost bought them, but I didn't. And then I saw New York Times. I don't know if it's just the time of year. Orange cake. And I thought, I'd like
Well,
to
you
try
love
that.
that flavor, huh?
Well, orange, or I like a lemon cake. For my birthday, I always
Oh.
like a lemon cake. I know you're
lemon
chocolate.
bar,
I like
yeah.
lemon. But I saw
You're
an
my
orange
mom.
cake, and I
Yep.
thought that'd be interesting. Maybe I'll make an orange cake. I don't know.
Well, let's if you have suggestions for us, I would love to do a bake-off test. You and I could be very scientific about this.
Yes.
can do
And see, probably New York water is going to be better than my water down here.
Oh, I don't know about that. But
Well,
if
listen,
you're a
you make good
bagel
bagels.
fan, yeah, there you go. That's
Good bagels and pizza, right? They blame it on the water, don't they?
All right, folks. Thanks for joining us here on the Focus Group. We're going to wrap it up for the day. As you know, from the top of our show and during the middle, we are sponsored by Deep Discount. We'd like you to visit their site by going to ours, focusgroupradio.com. Click on the Deep Discount logo. It's a 50th anniversary sale. Movies that came out in 1974. Tim and I reeled off a whole bunch, but I picked the Murder on the Orient Express, the original that was directed by Sidney Lumet. Tim picked Homebodies. This is a TBF. A Tim
Homebodies.
Bennett
We haven't
find.
seen it. We don't know, but it's
And
creepy.
he says, check the trailer out first, then go to Deep Discount and order Homebodies. And the new release this week is a horror film that takes place in Plymouth, Mass. called, appropriately enough, Thanksgiving on Blu-ray. So we'd like to remind everybody to don't text and drive, arrive alive, and we will see you in the new week.
It's The Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.
That was a stunning focus group.